ඔව් දැන් පින් එක මම පින් එක දුන්න සමින් එක අනේ මට මොනවක්වත් දන්නේ නැහැ හොඳේ දැන් මට මෙන්න මෙන්න ජල්ලිකවලින් කියවන්නේ හරි හරි දැන් ලෝකලින් නම් ඉන්නේ මැඩම් වයිස් දෙවිලා ඊට පස්සේ ඉවර වුණාන් පස්සේ තමයි ඉන්නේ එතකොට මැඩම් එයාව මේක වෙයිට් කරන්න ओके कब ओ आए बस කියන්නේ එහෙම මොන දෙනෙක් තාල නෑ සර් ඔව් නිකන් තියෙන්නේ සර් ඔව් හරි හරි මොකක්ද
A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to the inaugural session of the Peradeniya University International Research Session hosted for the year 2023 by the University of Peradeniya. iPURSE is a dynamic and innovative conference that brings together leaders, industry experts, and visionaries from diverse fields. This annual event serves as a platform for exploring cutting-edge trends, fostering networking opportunities, and sharing invaluable insights. Join us today at iPURSE to engage in inspiring discussions and shape the future of our ever-evolving world. Now, I cordially invite the Vice-Chancellor, Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Terence Madhujit, the Director of Undergraduate Research Congress and a co-chair of iPURSE 2023, Professor Janaka Ekanayaka, the Guest of Honor, Professor Arun Shokalingam, the keynote speaker, Professor Ajit D. Alvis. I invite the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Professor Vasanthi Pinto, representing all 9 faculties, and a participant representing all the presenters at iPURSE 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka Mata, Aka Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Aka Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Sundara Siri Barini, Suradi Ati Sogamana Lanka, Danya Danaya Nikaman Pala Guru Kiri Jaya Bhumi Ramya, Apa Hata Sapa Siri Sekta Sadhana, Jivana Mata, Iliganu Mena Apa Bhakti Puja, Namo Namo Mata, Apa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Upave Apa Vidya, Upamaya Apa Satya, Upave Apa Shakti, Apa Hada Tula Bhakti, Upa Apa Ayoke, Apa Ge Anuprani, Upa Apa Jivana Ve, Apa Muktiya Upave, Nava Jivana Gemini, Vitina Apa Pugudukaran Mata, Jana Vina Vadavamina Ragina Yanu Mena Jaya Bhumikara, Chitramava Kavidaru Kalabalina, Yamu Yamu Vinopama, Premavada Samaveda Durarada, Namo Namo Mata, Apa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Apa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata.
Now, I invite Professor Janaka Ekanayaka, the Director of Undergraduate Research Congress, to deliver the welcome speech.
Good morning, everybody. Vidya Jyoti, Professor Chandra Vikram Singh, the Chief Guest of iPURSE 2023, Dr. Arun Choklingam, our Chief Guest of Honor, Professor M.D. Lamawansa, the Vice Chancellor of University of Peradeniya, Professor Madhujit, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Deans and the Directors of faculties, institutions and centers, presenters of iPURSE 2023, my dear friends and colleagues. On behalf of the organizing committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 24th research sessions of the University of Peradeniya. Let me start my speech from a quote made by the author of the book Introduction to Interdisciplinary Studies, Prof. Alan Repko. The disciplines are the place where we begin, but not where we end. This quotation reminds us the disciplines are not silos. They are all interconnected. And the best research often takes place at the intersections of disciplines. The annual research sessions of the University of Peradeniya, which were inaugurated in 1996, have undergone many changes over the years. This year, you will witness a completely new phase with the first day of iPURSE focusing on the intersection of disciplines under a single theme. I'm sure by combining insight from different fields, researchers can develop a more comprehensive understanding of the new frontiers of knowledge and new opportunities that would not be possible if they worked in isolation. In the above spirit, let me wind up my welcome speech by expressing my hope that you will all create new networks that lead to more multidisciplinary research, allowing us to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I invite Professor Damayanti Dasanayake onto the stage to introduce the guest of honor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Arun Chaklingam. Dr. Chaklingam is a professor of medicine and global public health at the University of Toronto. He was the founding director of global health at University of Toronto's Dalalana School of Public Health. Founding director of the Office of Global Health at USNI's National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute. Founding director of global health at Simon Fraser University, Vancouver. An academic and health researcher over 45 years. He held key executive positions at Canadian Institute of Health Research, Ministry of Health at Government of Canada and World Hypertension League. During his tenure with World Hypertension League, he established World Hypertension Day in 2005, and now it is an annual event on May 17th every year. During his term of office at the NIH, he established and funded Centers of Excellence for Training and Research in 11 low-middle income countries in Asia, Africa, South and Central Americas to enhance capacity building in heart and lung disease prevention. Dr. Chaklingam is passionate about global health research, particularly on non-communicable disease prevention and control in low and middle income countries. He chaired the most successful World NCD Congress 2023, just completed on June 30th, 2023 at Toronto, Canada, on a theme entitled Equitable and Sustainable Health for All, attended by scientists, policymakers, practitioners from 55 countries from every continent on the globe. He has established research collaborations in many countries and has published over 180 research articles, 11 book chapters, and 8 books, including the groundbreaking White Book on CVD in Developing Countries, and the US Institute of Medicine, National Academy of Sciences. To his credit, he was one of the authors of the United Nations Resolution 66A on prevention and control of NCD, signed by all 192 countries of the world. Dr. Chaklingam is conferred a number of fellowships by organizations such as the American College of Cardiology, Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, International Academy of Cardiovascular Sciences, American Heart Association, and a senior fellow of Dudley Institute of Global Health Research. He has been recognized by national and international organizations for his seminal work on cardiovascular disease prevention and control, both in Canada and globally. He climbed and summited the glacier-covered Mount Kilimanjaro, which is 5,895 meters above the sea level, also called the Roof of Africa, in 2002. He climbed and circumambulated Mount Kailash, which is 5,319 meters above sea level, in 2016. Thank you.
Without further delay, I invite our guest of honor, Professor Arun Chokalingam, to take the stage and enlighten us with his expertise and vision.
Hi, Bowen. Vanakkam. Good morning. It's an honor and privilege to be in Peradeniya University, the oldest and the strongest and the best in all of Sri Lanka, and also competing and well recognized in most parts of the world. Thank you. Thank you to the organizers, Dr. Chanaka Nekanayaka. Thank you for the invitation, and also to my dear friend, Mr. Sudesh Mantilaki, who is responsible for me to be introduced to this university. Thank you. Do you have the slides ready? We can just... Which one to advance? Just the center? Excuse me, which one to advance? When I looked at the program, I'm quite impressed how far you have come to think of multidisciplinary. See, when you go multidisciplinary, 1 and 1 is not 2, it's 1 and 1 is infinity. I think that is where the intersection happens, that is where the benefits happen. And you have looked at 6 different themes ranging from global health, to management, to engineering and interdisciplinary. Very impressive. Next slide, please. So let me just go back in time. Some of you might know Thiruvalluvar and the Thirukural. When he talked about the opportunity, that's what the theme of your Congress is. So next slide, please. So would you mind giving me the computer over here? I can do it myself. Could you please advance? It says, Vollum Bagayan Aravine Vovade, Sellum Bayalam Sayal. Let me translate that to you in English. Please move on. Is it working now? Yeah, good. Could you please make it full screen? These things are hiding it. Yeah. What it says is, as much as possible, in every way, incessantly practice virtue in an ethical manner. When we look for the opportunities, we take every opportunity that comes. We compromise, but without compromising, let's do, so the world will be good. Where should I point? Doesn't seem to work. Give me a hand microphone, please. No, that's fixed. Fixed with a wire. Well, the wire. Let's make it big. Go to the next one. So the question is, what should we focus on? This is a question in most people's mind for many, many years. And this keeping in mind, next slide please. Sir, could you please move the next one? We looked at equitable and sustainable health for all. Next slide please. So this is the reason why we had a Congress which just ended by the end of June. And we looked at, our theme was equitable and sustainable health for all. Please move. So if you look at the right-hand side, some of the themes that are shown in this diagram, we are looking at the non-communicable diseases, which looks at cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, mental health, and lung health. All of them are called non-communicable disease, and they are all interconnected. In order to address that, we had 6 themes. Just go back here. So if you look at it, first of all, to reduce the inequalities. Where does the inequality comes from? First of all, in the gender, male and female. For the same qualification, for the same work somebody does, unfortunately, the male have been paid better when compared to the female, and that is one inequality. And there is inequalities between the rich and the poor in every country. And there is an inequality between the rich countries and poor countries. And there is an inequality between the health care that we provide for people who are well off compared to the native indigenous people. So the inequalities exist at every level. So we need to address that. And then the climate change. We are enjoying at the expense of climate. I'm sure people in the eastern part of the world know that the whole world is made up of the 5 elements. And we derive energies from sun, air, fire, and the water. So if we are able to generate it, and if we abuse it, then we are paying the price as a consequence. So climate change is very important. And then to see that the human lifespan, these diseases happen throughout the human lifespan. I am quite impressed that this Congress here today addresses many of them, interacting between the faculties and across faculties. So let me take one example to deal about it, and then that's expansion to other areas of your discussion. Climate change and health, a need for a multi-sectoral response, and as an example to illustrate the iPURSE themes. So many of them are illustrated here, and let me go through the climate change as an example, and then you can advance further in every field. So One Health contains both the environment leading to animal health to human health. So in a world where many complex adaptive systems connect and coalesce, interface of NCDs and climate change must be positioned in the construct of One Health. They are not different. And even in the medicine, when we treat for diabetes, we should treat in the context of other health issues, because we are as one human body and not individual body parts. So the soil health leads to plant health, which leads to animal health as well as human health, because we consume the plants. And all across we have got the microbes, which does affect, and because of the climate change, we will end up with different issues in our system. So looking across, environmental sustainability is very important for ecological security. The ecological security is important for human health security. When the human health is secured, then that leads to financial stability. If the people in any country are not well, then you cannot expect the country to be well off. So health is a fundamental issue. So One Health approach must embrace climate change and NCDs. So there are a few things which talks about the confluence of several challenges, pandemics and pollutions, and loss of biodiversity, along with climate change. So John Muir very nicely put it, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So if we talk only about the economic conditions, that is related to health. When we talk about health, that is related to transportation. See, if the transportation system and the emitting of too much carbon dioxide, then people will end up breathing that, and that leads to disease. And that leads to reduced economic power. One thing you all from Sri Lanka must be proud, that when Sri Lanka got its independence, your forefathers have focused on health, and they concentrated on health issues. For every 80 people, they have got a community health worker. And then for every 800 people, you have got a public health nurse. And then for every 8,000 people, that's how they have layered. So each one will have some kind of a personal attention in that community that they are living. But over a period of time, economics took more importance. And then unfortunately during the Civil War, you lost a lot of your original records, and your original health care. It is very unfortunate. But the determination I see across the universities and institutions in Sri Lanka, I am sure it will be revived back. I am back to next one, please. So this is what iPURSE is talking about. Next slide, please. So the climate change will have an impact on agriculture and nutrition, on refugees. Why should the climate change make the refugees? See, if there is too much heat or too much tornado, and even in Sri Lanka you might know, because of the tsunami, many people were killed. And then the economy went down, and many people migrated out of Sri Lanka. See, it is not that they really wanted to move. The situations demanded. And the current example is the Ukraine war. It is not that the people of Ukraine wanted to migrate to other parts of the world. It is an unnecessary and unwanted war that disposes people outside. Next slide, please. And when you deal all these, the poor people are the biggest victims. If you have got some money, if you have got the wealth, you can migrate. For those people who do not have the money, even for a passage to go on a boat, they can't. So that leaves the people either poor or suffer more. So the climate change and then the human tendency has created inequalities, and that is leading to the poor who are the worst victims. The change in heat and temperature, the climate change, leads to increased heat. Can you imagine having 37 degrees in Sri Lanka in the month of September, October? And that's a climate change. And this has the heat exhaustion, heat stroke, mental health, circulatory failure, renal disease, and so on. And infants and young children are especially vulnerable. So heat stress and water stress can lead to direct effect on human body on the left-hand side, on agriculture and the food systems. When I was traveling across Sri Lanka in the last few days, I saw a lot of reservoirs where the water level is down, and you can see the soil exposed. And these lead to poor production in your agricultural outcomes. So impact on mental health. There are studies which have clearly shown that climate change leads to anger, eco-anxiety, fear of impending doom and gloom, and also the climate change and conflict. For every degree increase in temperature, there is an increased frequency of interpersonal conflict by 2.4% and intergroup conflict by 11.3%. So no wonder the parochialism is becoming the order of the day. So wildfires, can you imagine a country like Canada, which is supposed to be a cold country, and even the northernmost part, which is called the Yukon territories, where the temperature is always minus 40 to minus 15. There we had wildfires, and we had to evacuate the entire population. These things are unreal. They don't happen. So that leads to the increased particulate matter, which is very dense, and you can't breathe well. And then that leads to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and on the other hand, because of the heat, so much of benzene formaldehyde produced in the natural air, which leads to cancer. So these are all leading to non-communicable disease. When the non-communicable diseases increases, then people have got to live. They end up with out-of-pocket expense. Imagine one cardiac arrest or one heart attack. People go to the hospital and they become very poor, and that leads to catastrophic health expenditure. Whatever people have earned for a whole lifetime, they will end up spending in that one incident. That leads people to become poor, and that puts a lot of debt on the family and the debt on the country. So we live in a world where food systems are threatening the environment, and environmental degradation is threatening the food systems. So it's a cyclical process. So this will get worse if we don't change our attitudes. So climate change through nutrition lens. By 2100, 40% of the world's land surface will likely experience altered climates. So up to 2050, agricultural output is projected to fall by 2% per decade. You can calculate yourself. So climate change through nutrition from a different lens. Higher production of staple crops will not be enough to make agriculture more resilient to climate change or better able to address the world's need for improved diets. So here is where the Faculty of Agriculture can make a note and see where you can improvise and enhance the agricultural outputs and finding ways to work with climate change. Nutrient-rich crops are more susceptible to droughts, pests, disease, and temperature fluctuations. Higher carbon dioxide produced through nutrient content of staple crops. Soil degradation also reduces nutrient quality. This is what I witnessed yesterday while I was traveling from Trincomalee to here, the lakes and then the reservoirs. They're all opening up with the soil exposed. Fruits and vegetables will ripen and rot very early. It don't last long. Then what about the rate of sea rise level? So it is said the rate of change will be by 3.4 millimeters per year. When you look at 3.4 millimeter per se, it's only a very small quantity. But when you look at the whole water body in the whole world, rising by 3.4 millimeters, that can drown Sri Lanka in no time. And that is what we are exposing ourselves to climate change. And in terms of livelihood, India has got over 7,000 kilometers of coastlines, and Sri Lanka has got about 1,800 kilometers of coastline. Fish constitutes an integral part of the diet for many communities, particularly those who are living in the coastal areas. Data shows that the marine fish catch has fallen since 1996 at a rate of 1.22 metric tons per year. This could leave populations at risk. Nutrient deficiencies due to lack of access, ocean warming predicted to impact fish diversity, distribution, abundance, and phenology. So this is where the Faculty of Fisheries or Animal Science can pay some attention and see where we can integrate and work together. So non-communicable diseases and the infectious diseases are not worlds apart. Climate change can lead to respiratory virus outbreaks, and that can lead to persons with pre-existing NCDs who are much more vulnerable. The case in point is COVID-19. We witnessed this in our lifetime. So the call for health systems. The health system must prevent and manage syndemics, that is, multiple epidemics. And it should prepare for increased NCD burden related to climate change. Provide comprehensive, continuous primary care. I think this is where once Sri Lanka was very strong. If you look at it even today, the health index, Sri Lanka leads in entire Asia. So that needs to be preserved. Influence of social, environmental, and commercial determinants of health to align with public health priorities. Develop capacity for health impact assessment of policies, programs in other sectors, not only in health sector, but also in other sectors. Professor Srinath Reddy once mentioned, every minister is a health minister. You can have an agriculture minister, you can have a transport minister, you can have a fisheries minister. What they need is to improve their sectors that will lead to better health. So collectively, we need for a better health and better economy. They are all depending on each other. And finally, promote appropriate use of technologies and ensure affordability. I think this is where the engineering and the artificial intelligence and the advancement in technology, including the big data, can help us. What we have done for clinical trials over 6 years has now become possible to do it in over a year. We can do multi-center trials with the different populations at the same time. We can collect the data simultaneously, and we can find solutions for different populations and different continents. I think it's quite possible due to science. And climate change and NCDs are totally interrelated. And if you look at the center one, impact is related to health equity. Failure in health system response further aggravates health inequities, which actually leads to the center one, which is unrelated to health equity. I'm just going to go fast. The response of NCD is to catalyze and coordinate multi-sectoral action. So that is what this Congress is aiming, multi-sectoral action to get both economic and health benefit to everybody in this country and this world. So the same principles and responses apply to every sector. So never before in human history have we been forewarned about the dire future that awaits us if we follow the present path to prediction. But also, on the flip side, never before in human history we have been so forearmed with the knowledge and tools to alter that future for planetary health and human well-being and wealth of the countries. So if it is a challenge to human intellect and enterprise as to how we shape our destiny, changing the destiny of the world is not by G7, not by G20, not by parochialism. It is by all of us collectively. So public health must be the world's GPS to guide that journey through complexity of changes as we advance to our common future. So what is the action that we need to do? Advance science, stream to social purposes, assemble an array of potential allies, amplify advocacy, accelerate action, assert accountability. That is very important. We as global citizens, we do have a moral responsibility to question our rulers of any country, to be accountable. You can pay a huge amount of tax. If the tax is not reinvested for the health of the people, for the education of the people, for the wealth of the people, then there is something wrong, and we have an obligation to question them. So where do we go from here? Agitate. Keep your mental faculty agitated to find new solutions. Communicate. It is important to express yourself based on facts and evidence I emphasize based on facts and evidence and not based on WhatsApp evidence. And this is what was told by Dr. George Alain, who is very well known. He was a former director of PAHO and well regarded. And he spoke at our Congress on the 26th at the opening ceremony. And then he said, you should challenge. Don't let the bureaucracy control. Challenge the system to bring about the much needed change. Because the global health and economy is already in crisis. I don't need to tell this audience because very recently you have gone through the sufferings. So parochialism is not the way to go about. I see at G20 there is so much of parochialism, which is very sad. And we have got what is called sustainable future, the Sustainable Development Goals. And yesterday, the United Nations is contemplating, do we really meet the global challenge by 2015, the deadline set out? It doesn't look like that. So, thank you. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Thank you all for your attention. And Nandri, Vanakkam, Sri.
Thank you very much for your insightful speech, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I invite Professor Dhammika Maganarachchi to introduce our chief guest.
Good morning. I am privileged to introduce the chief guest for the iPURSE 2023, the astrobiologist, Professor Nalin Chandra Wickramasinghe, Director of the Buckingham Center for Astrobiology, and visiting professor of many more institutes, including the University of Peradeniya. Born on 20th January 1939 in Colombo, he had his education at Royal College Colombo, and his interest in current issues of science had started at the age of 11 with starting of his schooling at Royal. Entering the University of Colombo in 1957, he was interested in applied mathematics as he thought mathematics was the most essential tool to explore the universe. He obtained first-class honors in maths in 1960, and he was awarded the Commonwealth Scholarship and entered Cambridge University the same year. He was conferred the Doctor of Science degree in 1973, and he obtained his PhD in astrophysics in 1963 under the mentorship of Sir Fred Hoyle. Along with Sir Fred Hoyle, Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe developed the first truly modern scientific theory of panspermia. His other research interests include interstellar matter, infrared astronomy, light scattering theory, applications of solid-state theory to astronomy, the early solar system, comets, astrochemistry, and also astrobiology. Professor Wickramasinghe was the founding director of NIFS, then IFS, from 1982 to 1984. Please welcome Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, we can find out where did we come from. Thank you.
We are privileged to have our esteemed chief guest, Vidya Jyoti, Professor Chandra Vikramasinghe, with us virtually, and I now invite him to address the gathering and share his insights with us.
You can start. Hello, sir.
Hi, I
Yes,
can
yes,
see
can hear you, sir.
the screen and myself in the corner as well. So am I, hi, can you hear me now? Okay. You can start. I can start, okay. Well, I start right now? I start now. Okay, those were very grim predictions in the last slides of your last distinguished speaker. And he of course, ameliorated them by saying that if you do certain things, the future may not be as bleak. Anyway, my brief is different. I just want to be sort of as a very senior alumnus of the University of Ceylon and graduated way back in 1960, I would like to just talk about the progress of science in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon, from 1960, from around 1960. There was, of course, no Peradeniya campus at the time, at the time that I was an undergraduate in what was then the University of Ceylon, Colombo. I graduated in 1960. And what I want to first talk about is the role that I played in setting up or helping the government of Sri Lanka to set up an Institute of Fundamental Studies. Because in the 1960s, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, there was no interdisciplinary activity or research activity in Sri Lanka. There was, of course, the one institution that was called the Ceylon Institute of Scientific and Industrial Research, which was largely an engineering activity headed by Dr. Janalingam, my old friend Dr. Janalingam, who was a fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. So I'm particularly happy to speak to you and to start by saying telling you the background of how interdisciplinary setup was started under my guidance, which was called the Institute of Fundamental Studies, IFS, in 1983. And now it's, of course, a thriving institution, NIFS, which straddles physical sciences, biological sciences, and even space science. When I first had my discussions about this with President Jayawardena in 1982-83, about the setting up of this Institute of Fundamental Studies in Sri Lanka, I really became acutely aware of the absolute need in this country to encourage a scientific culture. And the background of, as far as Jayawardena was concerned, was that he had just visited India and seen a huge lot of progress in India on scientific matters. There were institutions, scientific institutes covering almost every aspect of modern science. So Jayawardena was so impressed by this that he came back to Sri Lanka, sought me out because I was a very frequent visitor to the country at the time, and essentially talked to me and asked why in Sri Lanka, if India can do all this, why not have something similar in Sri Lanka. And this was the beginning of the venture that I sort of masterminded or headed or inspired the setting up of the Institute of Fundamental Studies. So Jayabodha's exhortation to me was one with which I fully agreed, and I began to work on that, and it led in the fullness of time to the IFS. I think the instinctive urge of humans to understand the world in which we live, I think this is a natural instinct, instinct in humans that date back possibly tens to or hundreds of thousands of years. In the Indian subcontinent, this was no less a priority, and one that expressed itself in Vedic culture thousands of years before the Western world even could talk of mathematics and science and so on, and boast of all the intellectual achievements throughout the Christian era. In fact, we often forget that fundamental concepts of mathematics and science have deep roots in the Indian subcontinent. For instance, I think most of you know this, our familiar number system that we take for granted, the 1, 2, 3, and so on, concept of negative numbers, and even the concept of infinity. These are very important concepts in mathematics. They all belong to this part of the world, to the Indian subcontinent. And the Western world only very reluctantly adopted such ideas as the number system rather late in the day. The progress of humans over the past 10,000 years is better documented than in earlier times. Such progress was clearly punctuated by a long series of technological developments, getting more and more sophisticated as the centuries rolled on. For example, the invention of agriculture came quite early. The use of metal tools, irrigation of the land, and the birth of urban settlements marked the beginning of a trend that led in turn to other specific technological advances. For example, the invention of printing, the use of coal, the use of energy sources like coal, which of course we deprecate now because of the pollution and the global warming problems that ensue from that. But that was important at the time in the 17th, 18th century. The steam engine came, then the internal combustion engine, or little cars that consume a lot of energy and petrol and pollute the atmosphere. That came in quick succession. Aircraft were developed at the dawn of the 20th century. Finally, rockets and spacecraft were invented and used, and all this heralded what I regard as the dawn of a new age, a new space age. The 20th century witnessed perhaps the greatest revolutions in fundamental physics and biology. Nuclear physics achieved its maximum potential in these years, leading to the possibility of nuclear power that might eventually replace coal and gas that was being used in earlier decades. And also, there were more sinister repercussions of the development of nuclear power, understanding of nuclear physics, and this led to dreadful things like Hiroshima. And the dreaded continuing prospect of future nuclear conflicts around the world. In relation to biology, the crucial step, of course, was the set of discoveries that were related to DNA, the discovery of DNA, unraveling our genome, leading the way to either gene therapies and improved health outcomes, or the prospect of even biological warfare. All these loom very large on the horizon in the present century and in the years that would follow. Developments in computing, IT, and electronic communications more generally have perhaps had the more fast-reaching effects and impact on humanity in recent times. And further rapid progress in these areas, in the areas of IT, appears to be an absolute certainty. The development of artificial intelligence is grabbing the headlines these days, perhaps unfairly. because artificial intelligence is, of course, limited by what we, human intelligence, can put into the system, and perhaps the computer systems and so on process this internal information coming from humans, coming from our brains, more efficiently than we can do individually. But in my view, the exploration of space and the unreserved acceptance of our biological links with the external cosmos may well occupy top place in our ambitions for the short and medium-term future. It's only a few days ago, I think, that the news headlines said discovery of life on an exoplanet 200 light years away. So the search for life outside the Earth is progressing really very fast at the moment. And on a very short time scale, I think we would be confirming that life is not a sort of insular terrestrial phenomenon, but a truly cosmic one. Of the many future scenarios, the more general scenarios that we might wish to contemplate, the role of science and technology must inevitably rank very, very high. I think your previous speaker highlighted the importance of bringing different areas of science together if you are to avoid really big catastrophes in the foreseeable future. Many long overdue shifts of paradigm have been held in abeyance for too long. Future progress may well be contingent upon the acceptance of these paradigm shifts that are really staring us in the face. In this category, the long overdue acceptance of the cosmic nature of life and of the prevalence even of alien life throughout the universe would be transformative for biology, and as well as for astronomy, and they would have really far-reaching implications for our day-to-day lives. One of the most interesting discoveries that have been talked about in the last few weeks were the discoveries by the James Webb Telescope of galaxies that were at some 30 billion light years from us. It used to be thought, and it's still sort of firmly adhered to, that the universe began with the Big Bang some 13.8 billion years ago. 13.8, exactly 13.8 billion years ago. And this has been the orthodoxy in astronomy and cosmology from the early decades of the 20th century. Now that whole superstructure of cosmology is beginning to collapse with the powerful telescopes that have been deployed, like the James Webb Telescope. So if you have a galaxy that is essentially dated at some 30 billion light years, and the universe is only supposed to have started as a Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, there's some major rethinking that has to be done in cosmology. Cosmologists are reluctant to change their minds because they have been really sort of firmly brainwashed into this idea of everything starting from nothing, creation ex nihilo 13.8 billion years ago. So I think all that is bound to change. And the universe, the model of the universe that's going to emerge is going to be much closer to the ideas that have been prevalent in the Indian subcontinent. Eternal universe, oscillating universes, and all these are being considered by a minority of scientists, of extremely talented, clever scientists, who are at the present being marginalized because they are challenging this great orthodoxy of the Big Bang universe. And I can think of people in India, Jayant Narlika, people in Britain, Sir Roger Penrose, who's a Nobel laureate in Oxford. He's probably a couple of years older than me. He's been writing vigorous sort of polemical accounts of how the Big Bang theory has to be revised to accommodate these new discoveries. Then I think with the emergence of subjects such as biophysics and, of course, astrobiology, I should also tell you that astrobiology is very popular nowadays. But the word astrobiology was one that was coined by me and Fred Hoyle in the late 1970s when we noticed that the building blocks of life, very complex building blocks of life, are everywhere, and we realized also that astronomical processes and biological processes are probably really intimately intertwined. So I think transdisciplinary considerations must, at all levels, must play an increasing role in our future exploration of science, in the future exploration of our planet, and our attempts to exploit our own planetary resources, and as your previous speaker said, to alleviate disease, to improve the role of prediction in future health issues like pandemics, improve the quality of human life generally in ways that would minimize environmental degradation. And that's a big issue in this sort of present era. Space exploration, which began in the middle of the 20th century, would undoubtedly continue, I think, with greater and greater emphasis, with further searches for life in our own planetary neighborhood. There's been, I think, 2 spacecraft that have been launched in the last year. One was called JUICE by the European Space Agency, and there's one that is going also on a very short timescale from NASA to explore the possibility of life on the moons of Jupiter. Jupiter has many moons. Europa is one of the sort of most famous of the Jovian moons. And the chance of having life under the cracked surface of icy surface of Europa is that they're very, very strong. So I think all these explorations, space explorations, which began in the 20th century, are going to undoubtedly continue. And the existence, I believe, of life on Mars, life on the moons of Jupiter, even life underneath the ices of the south pole of the moon, these are going to come into fruition in the very, very near future. Space exploration will also inevitably include the sort of financial, so practical issues of space mining, because we're running short of minerals that are relevant for making computer chips and so on. And we would certainly find lots and lots of these in the asteroids and smaller objects that are hurtling around in our solar system, in our own vicinity. So exploitation of biological resources, of the interplanetary interstellar environment, exploitation of mineral resources would also contribute heavily to what's going to happen in the future. Space biology, space medicine, and the development of IT, the further development of IT generally would be absolutely bound to happen, and happen fast, leading to profound changes in our way of life in future generations. The 20th century could not only be seen as a century of science and technology, but a century of devastating wars. The First World War, the Second World War, including wars against Nazi Germany, wars against Japan, the Vietnam War, which I think was dreadful, the war in Iraq, which I think was equally dreadful. And in the present century, in the present years, in fact, right here and now, we have the war between Russia and Ukraine, which is in a sense a war between communist Russia and the so-called, and I stress it's the so-called, it's not that free, it's the so-called free world. It is, I believe, a clear priority for the future to work towards the avoidance of wars, avoidance of devastating conflicts, which are likely to prove even more disastrous than the wars that took place before. If we can avert the risk of lethal wars, there could be much that our species can look forward to, provided that we preserve our planet in a stable and habitable state. Alongside the great strides of technological progress that I've hinted at already, the protection of the environment and prevention of its decay must remain a really important priority for future planners. An increase in the Earth's average temperature seems almost inevitable if you look at modern trends. I mean, we're seeing that to this here and now with forest fires and flooding in various places. And keeping such destructive events to an absolute minimum would be of absolute utmost importance. Continuing industrial development will, at least for the future, involve some dependence on fossil fuels. I mean, that sort of net zero target is a bit of a joke these days. But moving away from such dependence on fossil fuels is very, very important in the longer term future. And this would, of course, depend on nations continuing to conduct research in other alternative energy sources. I mean, they talk of wind and wave, but nuclear energy is the possibility that has been essentially sidelined for the wrong reasons. And recovering the prospect of nuclear fuels, I think, is going to be a very important component in our attempt to reach net zero pollution in the near future. To remove carbon dioxide from the environment using new technologies also remains an option to be more fully explored. All modern states pay lip service to this important requirement, but there is no guarantee that much will be achieved in the direction of net zero carbon emissions in the foreseeable future. That's my personal point of view. I think others might differ. Governments have not been able to achieve anything approaching net zero in sort of 25, 30 years from now. The theme of your conference, Navigating New Frontiers, Exploring Opportunities, is both timely and thought-provoking. In today's world, we are facing unprecedented challenges, including, as I mentioned just now, the specter of climate change, of catastrophic climate change. But we also have unprecedented opportunities to address such challenges through innovation, new scientific techniques, and collaboration around the world for the benefit and well-being of all humanity, not just one small group or another group. I'm sure your conference will provide an opportunity for scientists and academics of all disciplines to come together and share their ideas to navigate these new frontiers and explore new and challenging opportunities. I'm confident that the papers and the arguments that you present at your meeting will provide valuable insights and inspire us to think more creatively, more effectively about the challenges and opportunities that we face in the decades that lie ahead. I am particularly interested in seeing how your conference explores interdisciplinary solutions that benefit society as a whole. I think the whole of science has to be regarded as a unified project, not broken up into distinct and inseparable branches. In today's complex world, it is more important than ever to approach problems from such multidisciplinary perspectives. By working together, academics from different disciplines can develop innovative solutions that address the root causes of the problems that we face today and create a more sustainable and equitable future for all. We need to bring together the many different strands of evidence that need to be pulled together urgently for the benefit of all humanity. I would like to end with a quotation from a sonnet by the great American poet or poetess Edna St. Vincent Millay from a book titled Sonnets, Unspun What Quarry. And I quote, "Upon this gifted age, in its darkest hour, rains from the sky a meteoric shower of facts. They lie unquestioned, uncombined. Wisdom enough to leach us of all our ills is daily spun, but there exists no loom to weave it into fabric." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insights, sir.
Was it
Ladies and
okay?
gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I invite Professor Lilantha Samaranayaka to introduce the keynote speaker.
Good morning. It's a privilege and honor to introduce the keynote speaker, Professor Ajit D. Alvis. Professor Ajit Priyal D. Alvis is a senior professor of chemical and process engineering at the University of Moratuwa and currently the Dean of Faculty of Graduate Studies of University of Moratuwa and the Chief Innovation Officer of the National Innovation Agency. He graduated from University of Moratuwa in chemical engineering and subsequently obtained his PhD from the University of Cambridge, also in chemical engineering. He has worked at the University of Reading, United Kingdom and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, India. He has a Master of Business Administration from the Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Lankan. He is a Fellow of National Academy of Sciences, Sri Lanka. Professor Ajit D. Alvis has made significant contributions to his field and has published numerous research papers and articles. His research interests include but not limited to waste management, climate neutral cities, food process engineering, environmental engineering, nanobiotechnologies, bioenergy systems, and eco-innovations. He has been recognized for his work both locally and internationally and has received several honors and awards throughout his career. He has been serving as a science team leader in the Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology and as the project director at Coordinating Secretariat for Science, Technology and Innovation at the Ministry of Science, Technology and Research. He was a member of the Intellectual Property Advisory Commission, Sri Lanka, Governing Council of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and also founder director of the Sri Lanka Green Building Council. In addition, he's also pioneering in innovation management and intellectual property in the serious interest of national development and made significant contributions there. So let me finish this introduction with the statement by Robert Swan, which has strongly been endorsed by Professor Alvis to summarize his vision. The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let me open the floor to Professor Ajit Alvis to deliver the keynote on university research, research advocacy, and economic game changing. Over to you, sir.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, humbled. Thank you to Professor Ekanayaka and the organizers for the invitation. Really feel happy but humbled as well for the invitation. So I thought I am going to push the envelope in your direction. That is what I thought will be my push in this presentation. If you see this quote, Ceylon provides a magnificent field for research. Whose comment that I have taken here, it's from your founder, Io Jennings, right? So when the invitation came to get to the Road to Peradeniya, I thought I will relook at the Road to Peradeniya book, and a book that I went from cover to cover in one day because it's so fascinating. And there are so many things to be taken. I'll be taking few things in that as well. So Of course, it's very interesting what he said, and it seems so relevant, and sadly with time passing and with the current scenario, how in 1940s, 50s and so on, what he wrote and what he experienced seems to be unfortunately true for today as well, which we cannot be proud of course. So there are so many things when he was trying, so I would really look at from a Peradeniya point of view to revisit this. This Ceylon is really capturing Peradeniya, right? He was talking about in general, but he was very much focused on this Peradeniya and this place and the opportunity. It was not broadly Ceylon, right? But it's a very, very interesting comment, so I thought I pick that up. So it's with that and looking at the current Sri Lankan situation, that's why I said I'll be challenging. University research and research advocacy for economic game changing. Now, don't you think that can we expect somebody else to do it, or can we also be part of it? I mean, challenging ourselves. Whether it's fight or flight, a lot of people are taking flight, but I don't think that are the answer, but the idea of putting it is to fight. But also indicating that there's so much that we can do. So Sri Lanka declared bankruptcy on 12th April 2022. And we know since that, we have seen it now, we have experienced it, we know very well about that. And we are constantly hearing about what is happening, are we complying with conditions, and what's in store for us in the time to come. We seem to be just listening to those, but we don't hear anything extra about or different about doing something different to come out of this situation. What we hear is manipulating numbers maybe, or I won't say manipulating in the sense, but trying to manage numbers in a very, very traditional sense. And of course, from an outside, I'm not sure whether we will be pushed to look at innovation or do things differently. Maybe that is what it's up to us. So that's kind of be what I'm trying to challenge here. It's not moving. Is this not working? So when countries face these type of scenarios, of course, this is a situation. How do you react? So this is a case of United States when, of course, they are in a space race, completely different from an economic bankruptcy. But of course, pride of the nation, and here another country that they want space race, having sent the Sputnik up, defeating basically the United States. So it was the president at the time, and John F. Kennedy came to a university, that is Rice University, and something that doesn't happen here, right? But something to think about. If you really have this partnership, that's the way it should be. Said, yes, we are going to put an American on the moon, and not only that, bring him safely back to Earth. So it's not just one-way ticket, but trying to have the complete journey. So you have that moonshot speech by the American president, and so now we call this as Sputnik moments. It's a nation in a kind of like backward scenario, having experienced somebody else beating them, and then rising up to the challenge, trying to do something very significant, different from the rest or the others, and again trying to establish themselves as a superior nation. So in a sense, a situation that we are maybe experiencing, we can say, look, okay, we are bankrupt, here we have an economy, and here we are, who are supposed to have the education, who have the knowledge, and how are we to think on this, taking up this data challenge? So that's what I'm trying to relate. And of course, President Kennedy said, we are selecting this to go into the moon, not because it's easy, but because it is difficult, right? You have to really challenging yourself something that is difficult to achieve, and somebody can say, look, this, you know, it's not safe, but then you are challenging. And we know Sri Lankan also was involved in a way in if you take the University of Maryland, and in that all that plan, they were really nicely planning it across, and there were so many things. But something to understand is, when Apollo 11 landed on 1969 in July, right, the Eagle really did land. One thing we had to understand is that journey, if you take the Apollo 1, right, Apollo 1 to Apollo 11, Apollo 1 burnt on the ground. Apollo 1 burnt on the ground, and all 3 astronauts perished just inside the capsule, right? So that happened in 1967, January. Just imagine, 67 to 69, and 62 was the time when the JFK said, we are going to do that, and to put, again, America back on the map. So you can imagine the situation, but also we have to imagine the situation if something like that happened, like this is the first one, and you have said so much, this is billions of dollars at the time still, and if something happened, how would we react, right? So that's again something to think about it, but when your goal is set and you are focused, and Apollo 1 is another challenge that they faced, and within 2 years, 67 to 69, you are landing on the moon and bringing that people back, right? So that is unwavering commitment, and also putting everybody's effort towards one goal. Now that is needed for this kind of situation that we are probably facing as well, though it's not been articulated from the top. So again, we see how scientists and researchers can rally up. So this is all about research as well, and the researcher's role. That's why I put that very first from Ivy Jennings' statement, right? Because Sri Lanka seems to offer so much of rich opportunities for research, and can we translate that into an economic, game-changing situation? So we have also seen, if you take South Korea, for instance, it's well documented, the miracle of the Han River, that you really have a nucleus of 40 scientists that did it, and the Korea Institute of Science and Technology. Now that kind of indicates the potential possible once you have the right partnership and a team of dedicated group. Again, that unwavering attention, unwavering focus. So it's important. But the point that we can say is, can be done, and it has been done. We have examples, right? So something to think on that line. And also, a crisis is an opportunity to excel. We all perhaps can bring examples of that. And in COVID times, we said we used the Chinese letter and said crisis and an opportunity with the same letter. So the way you look at it, and we were all discussing about it. But now we really have truly a crisis, right? And how we take this as an opportunity is not by choice, but the point is how we respond to that situation. So there are plenty of examples that one can bring, even if you go back into the depression times or even wars and so on, how advances in science and technology really enable to overcome the situations and propel the nation from point of crisis to a completely different point. And this is what we talk about today in innovation, right? Pushing, embrace innovation to do things differently and to realize that what you sometimes may think as a very difficult goals. So examples I won't go in, but you have these examples. It even said Isaac Newton, when he was kind of isolated during the plague time in the Cambridge, that he came up with this theory. So using time wisely, and then you know the change that takes place as a result. So if you look at our problem in Sri Lanka today, for what is facing us or why we get into this position for 75 years of existence as an independent nation, because probably what Munidasa Kumaratunga said is very true. And he said it long before management faculties, whether it's Harvard or anywhere, talked about innovation, innovation management, business goals, and so on. There's nothing of that sort when Munidasa Kumaratunga was talking about. And he wrote this, and he passed, you know, he exited from this world basically even before Sri Lanka received independence. So, but such a wise saying, and that poem is interesting to look at in totality. But I take this one. The nations which does not create new things will not rise. Very, very true. Because that's where we have gone wrong, right? We have shown an economic growth. We have jobs and then get some money back. So it's kind of not the right path to do, right path to move. So so that is what you see when you look at, if you watch Harvard University's Atlas of Economic Complexity, you can really watch how the nations have progressed, because you can run through these years, different countries. And one thing that strikes about Sri Lanka is, here you come to 1977 and thereabout, you get kind of like textiles suddenly thrown into the export mix. And that's about it. Thereafter, nothing else changed. Little bit of IT comes a little later, right? So our complexity is not something that we can be proud of. So we can see, if you look at the Bangladesh and Vietnam, going through the same years, you can really traverse through history, the economic history, and how the performance in that atlas. But Sri Lanka gives a very sad story, pre-presentation. Essentially, what is shown is we have not been creative, and our export basket has not diversified at all. And in that absence of diversification of the export basket, we are not having the required cash flows. Because what we produce, nobody else wants from outside, and literally we are not producing that much. And for a lot of commodities that we produce, we need to produce lots more and sell more to bring some of the things that we need. And that is why we have this eternal trade imbalance, and so on, right? Something to take to heart. And that is where the S&T comes in. That is where we, the researchers, can probably change course if we really apply ourselves. What is of interest and what we should learn, again, is some of these economic theories, which we don't hear from the economists usually. Pardon me, but I'm just putting this on the table. But if you look at 1987, if you take Solovs, who won the Nobel Prize for economics for the technology theory, he was looking at past America and was looking at how America came to dominate in such a way, and kind of identified the thesis was basically, yeah, it's technology. It's technology coming increasingly developed, deployment, and then benefiting from those results. That's how the America changed. And that is why the supremacy. And for the other nations, those who have changed, it's again the case of technology. So that is Solov's theory in the 87, the Nobel Prize for Economics. But a couple of years, 2018, if you go into Paul Romer, it's more interesting in a sense, but little challenging, something to think currently for today. But he was going towards endogenous innovation, or endogenous theory of economic growth. And that's his theory, because it's almost, with Solov's, it's exogenous theory of economic growth, right? So endogenous theory, which actually is a Nobel laureate on economics, the question is, yeah, it's internal parameters, internal processes that you can get economic growth, which gives us something to think about. We are within. And if we have the processes, if we mobilize the processes, that means, okay, this thesis basically says you can achieve growth through that process. And that's the theory. And what's the kind of like the nuts and bolts of it? It's about human capitals, it's about new ideas, it's about research as well. So it's very interesting. It's directly kind of pointing in our direction, right? A community that probably can do these things, and also the numbers, the way we get our ideas, and then when we move on doing these practices, and said it's perfectly possible to have this economic growth in that way. So this gives us, in a way, a relief to think that, yes, it's possible. It's not something, a dream or something that is wishful thinking, but solid two theories have winning Nobel Prizes on economics is telling us. But we don't hear from our economists on this side and this way, right? These two theories being seriously discussed about. We talked about the parameters of monetary theory, the exchange rates, and so on. So why I push this on this idea? So it says endogenous, we can do it. But do we understand when a country sees whether that we have been in this country, how do the country observe that? Country feel it if we have contributed to the country. The country feels that yes, there was this person or there was this group. Country will not feel in a positive sense if that feel, look, this person's living has only been extractive in nature when you lived in the country. I've been using resources but not giving anything back. So just a point to think about, that we have to think what are we doing and have we really understood this point, right, in looking at our duty as having had knowledge and in a situation, and in this situation we have a bankrupt being declared, definitely not our fault for sure, right? I don't think any one of us will accept guilt, but the point is we cannot say, yes, we are not the guilty party, but are we to say that we will do nothing because we are not the guilty? Let those who are guilty do it in their turn. That will also be wishful thinking, right? So maybe we know they can't do, but we feel that we can do, right? So this is something to think. So that's the thesis on which I will move through. So looking at problems like the problems that we speak on, yes, we discussed about the global, but I'm just pointing some of these issues. Take any of these headings. Sri Lanka is either having complex problems, or to me, from an innovation background, I say we have more wicked problems. Problems can be simple. You have very direct answers, easy to understand solutions. But even if you have complex problems, solutions are there because you can kind of discretize the complex problem in a careful manner, and you can still arrive and see a solution. But wicked issues, it's very difficult. Wicked issues challenge us more, and it seems that we may what we have. So going from energy down to the economy, right? So at this stage, we don't have to discuss about the economy that we have now declared, and now we are trying to do it in the how to reverse it. But all these things leads to the economy, and so on. So if you take at productivity, right? We have to think Sri Lanka has a world record in public service, because we have every 16 Sri Lankans have one public official, service official. So it's probably the world's per capita, the best bureaucracy that we have. And yes, Professor Arun mentioned about the ratios that we run in public health. But this is the ratio that is in public service. And what we see is not getting resulted in solutions. We have a bloated system that is not, we cannot be proud of in terms of productivity. So right across we have this situation. So I'll take one example of this wicked where we can, considering Peradeniya has all 9 faculties, no other university can probably boast of that, right? From any area that you name, you probably able to rally together for transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, or even disciplinary, right? So you have it. But just look at this situation about child malnutrition. Technically, what you see from what we observe, that we have scenarios that you hear about malnutrition, mothers, children being identified. Of course, we may not be able to look at headlines in the daily press as scientific data. But even if you take a UNICEF report that's about a couple of years old, and you see that Sri Lanka has been highest prevalence in the world in the child malnutrition in terms of stunting and wasting, right? It's in the worst 10 countries. So we are between Eritrea and Somalia. I know this is not a good public statement, but that's the way the document, a global document, is positioning Sri Lanka and the child in the world stage. So it's something that should strike at your heart with the knowledge, how come this happened? And on the other hand, we see our expenditure across to the world. We are buying about 200 billion rupees and actually it has been 400 billion at one point, of food from outside. And while we do that, we have been enduring or entertaining a 50 to 30% loss for the last 75 years in the post-harvest system. All right? So going back into one, it's where's the technology that can do that change. Second, why the human capital has not rallied around to get that issue solved. And the problem is when we have that type of malnutrition, which is below 5, age of 5, and the future generation is the cognitive development, you can wish good luck, because it's not something that is going to happen very positively. And if they happen to be turned out as politicians, because that's the only job that you can have without any qualification, it's not the fault of the politicians either, because they have had not their nutrition right at the beginning. So end result is not the problem of the person, end result is our society has ignored this issue and we have not rallied around to solve it. For a nation that was a granary of the East, is not something good that we have to think about. So we have endured that. So it's a wicked problem to me. Sometimes from a food engineering point, I see its solution seems to be the technology is very obvious, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to happen. We keep on identifying this issue, and we keep on keep having the issue. But knowing the devastating consequences of entertaining that issue is very significant. We should understand it. So we have a serious wicked problem that can affect the entire future of our society. Coming to the Paul Romer situation, we have maybe our administration and our decision makers need to think on this, because I said on the Paul Romer's case, it's about human capital. And one thing that strikes is we have a problem of sort. Even though we said, okay, how can we as researchers rise up to this game-changing situation, or can we be the game changers? Yes, but then if we lose the critical mass, that's a problem. So one thing you see is per million population, the full-time equivalent researchers, these seems to be having a problem, right? So 210, 5,162 was the number of researchers we had. This is not FTE full-time, this is an identified number of researchers. So the latest from NSF, coming at 2020, 6,064. You don't need a lot of AI algorithms to identify when you see 210, 230, 217, 2020 figures, we have a rate of growth as really another worry. Because from 2017, 5943 to 2020, 664. There's no addition, real significant addition to this pool. This is serious, right? So when it comes to per million population, the current value is 104, and this is 2020. And mind you, now with the exodus, if we take that numbers, we will be severely affected. I mean, like we have to maybe have to worry seriously. So something for us to think, yes, as researchers, we can do, but we also need a certain critical mass to be change agents. Something the decision makers need to be taken note of and understand. Because Paul Romer's theory says about how critical the new ideas and the human capital initiatives in the knowledge economy, that can be the transformative factor for that new economic growth. So we can't afford to lose this for a portion of this human capital. So, and again, what is very interesting to think about is, we have been talking and worrying about, because we have had elephant deaths. Last year was one of the worst, right? And they are all not natural deaths. Yet, if you look at the number of elephants, still the calculation is much more than the number of researchers. So something to think. So it's still above 6,064. Give or take calculation in either direction, right? But it's something. So we really need to worry about the researchers as well. And we need to understand. So hopefully, we are researchers who belong to this first category, who wants to belong to this first category, not the last three. You have people who will watch things happen, right? For sure. And sometimes who wonder what has happened. They are wondering, they are looking at, but not exactly grasping. Some, of course, who never knows, the Rip Van Winkle effect. But of course, we need who can make things happen, that's for sure. It is that character, that ability, that will enable us to do this change. Otherwise, we have to think like that. So looking at the past, what we see is, yes, we have done serious things. And small Sri Lanka has really been a center of excellence. But it's not only the human capital that has had new ideas, but also the system that enables those who have new ideas to practice. Now, when I take this picture of the world's first hospital system in Mihintale, what I would say is that not only people had ideas, let's do this, let's come up with these surgical tools, let's do this and have the behet toru and all that, but allowing the system to come into play and system to exist means that not only you had ideas, but you had an enabling environment for somebody else facilitating those thinkers to enable it to plant it on the ground. So we need both. And something to learn is that we have had that part. So we need to create that part, and hopefully universities are such places where you are encouraged for the diversity and ideas are welcome, and then we need to push. So that's up to us. So as researchers, we can take note from somewhere else that this is possible today as well, right? If I take this situation of Fleming, right? Fleming just went to one university, stuck in one lab, and did follow a dream. Because his dream of finding a solution so that British soldiers will come back home, they will not die of post-infections after a bullet wound or something. So he was very, very interested in about infections and finding a solution. That was his sole purpose, which he did. Serendipity thrown in to a good measure, right? So that means it's not a case of resources even. He was stuck in one university. He was not looking at where the other best stuff are there, so Queen Mary, but in the time. So it's there. And even if you take this situation, which Peradeniya University also has a certain role to play. If you look at Edward, the one who came up with the evolutionary biology, he came from the University of Alabama to Harvard, and then interestingly via botanical gardens to Ratnapura. So interestingly about this, and looking at the structure of various ant species, and he said, I am studying ants because I can find this resource anywhere. From my home to any place, I can see ants. So let me study ants. So he was not searching for any exotic stuff or any exotic equipment. He became world class with that object, with that fascination and that objective. So why this particular ant was, he was identifying the last two known species came from the Royal Botanical Gardens, Peradeniya. And so at one point he visited Peradeniya, and he went to near Peradeniya as well in search of this ant, but found the ant near the Ratnapura rest house. That's right, so Pompakale. So it's very interesting when you have that vision, right? So this is Professor Edward, right? So with that passion and with such resources, achieving that significant change is possible. What you need is that mindset on going to the end of, okay, having that very clear objective and then persistence. So it's important that your individual self, you put your heart to it and then engage, and then you can see the transformation. So we see that possibilities, right? If we use our knowledge and turn that knowledge into knowledge capital. So these are examples. Again, two researchers from University of Peradeniya, and Professor Lilantha will understand this story better. So this was a 3.1 million potential sale, actually a sale at that point, to India from the labors of 4 scientists, with some other scientists also giving that contribution. So we can, in a sense, turn tables, and this incidentally recovered an investment of a government on a certain experimental setup. So this is the situation, but how this ended is we had to go to the airport to welcome the nanotechnology fertilizer from India. So it's interesting if you do not run through the process well, intermediate victories turn out to be, at the end, we are not going to make that change. So you need to have that persistence approach. You need to be persistent. You need to be very clear about an end goal. And not only the researcher, the system there has to be that equivalent support. Otherwise, there can be issues in failures halfway. So this is important to understand. So I want to put this golden triangle, golden circle, to us as researchers, to we as all in an institution which is a university, right? There are 3 questions here. You have to look at what, how, and why is the most important, right? If you take this institute, we know exactly what is this institute. It's a university, what we should be doing. So we also know how we are doing that, right? We engage ourselves to produce graduates and maybe postgraduates and at least add knowledge and so on. But when inside as individuals in these institutions, why are we doing what we are doing? Do we have an above ourselves answer to this question, right? That is, you need to elevate yourself to think, I'm getting up in the morning to go to the university, and I will be having my research students and all things. What am my singular purpose in going there at this time, on this day, waking up? So it's almost like the Japanese way of talking about ikigai, right? So this why has been identified as the most important. So if all in an institute, if we get our why clear, we can push the institution to a very different position. And in terms, when we understand how and what, because these are what we are going to do, what we are doing as part, but understanding the why, our coming together to achieve a result is going to be very different, and the net result is going to be much, much more beneficial overall. It just goes beyond the boundaries of the institution, right? So it's identifying ourselves, changing our mindset, becoming more passionate and purposeful, that I'm going there, I'm doing this because of this, which is maybe the problem solving, right? And I can think of one small solution, a small example taking back to John F. Kennedy. Because after 1962, when he studied in September at Rice University, he was going around into a NASA space office, and he saw this. I hope the story is true, but the point is the stories tell the message clear. So he saw this janitor sweeping the floor and like that, and he just apparently said that JFK just took 1 minute off from just walking about and approached the janitor and asked what you are doing. And what he says is the janitor's answer has been, because this is post-Kennedy talk at Rice, and it's well known to the Americans that we are singularly purposed to get ourselves onto the moon and back. And the janitor's reply has been, I'm not sweeping the floor. Maybe sometimes if such a scenario happens in our country, sometimes we may think what the answer may be, right, in Suddha Sinhala, right? But the point is, what the janitor apparently has said is, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. Yes, I'm sweeping the floor, but my sweeping the floor is going to be a contribution towards putting a man on the moon, right? So everybody was in it. So that is what that why, the purpose means. And what we probably need is that purpose, right? That singular purpose, that it's possible for this economic gain change in a sense by us. Come what may, what the others are saying. So for that, having that purpose clear, we need to work on 2 things. So I'll be quickly going through this. What we try to do. Remember I said we have lots of issues, wicked problems and complex problems. Of course, they should be getting our attention. That's what we should be. But you as an individual, may even as a team, cannot tackle the entire wicked problem yourself or as a team. You need partnerships. But you need to take a chunk of that one and try to start addressing, because you know that I'm going to be part of that solution. It's like sweeping the floor of the corridor of that NASA. I know that sweeping is not going to put a man on the moon, but I'm making that organization move forward because the singularity of that purpose has been there. So you can think on these 4 quadrants, which I have not put that into a quadrant yet. I can think like Niels Bohr, right? The Niels Bohr approach is, I'm tackling a problem, maybe I'm identifying the basic research. Where is the electron at the time, understand the nucleus, little subatomic particles or wherever, or atomic particles at the time, right? But that's my fascination. But we know that is not going to change the society. But there's going to be an input at some point, someone else. But that's Niels Bohr's obsession. And some of us can be in that basic research. I can go towards applied research, right? When Edison comes up with the bulb. Edison never came up with new science together. The sciences were around, and he was putting things together with very creative imagination, right? So all of these things, even the bulb he didn't invent. The bulb was invented elsewhere. He knew how to improve. Again, Sri Lanka played a role in that because the bamboo fiber came from Sri Lanka. The very first natural fiber that has the best long-lasting in the bulb. Of course, the synthetic filaments came and the natural fibers lost their glory days. So that's applied research. So I can be like, as a researcher, I can be like Edison, doing practical things. But why am I doing these practical things? Because I know those things move the needle for the society. I'm getting things that will change. I can be like Jenner, right? I am fundamental in the first instance because how can I think? I'm thinking like, okay, can I vaccinate myself or can I do something ahead of a disease so I don't get the disease? So it's disruptive. It's not the normal thinking of the day. So you are in disruptive research space. And I can also think about this dark space, right? So if I put this into a situation, I think we should not engage ourselves in this first quadrant, the lower left quadrant. That is, we can map all what is presented here today, and we can map all what we are doing today or at some point, and we must move ourselves away from that quadrant, right? I am doing research which nobody will really acknowledge you for. And also I'm doing research which probably I know the answer. I am doing research which I don't have to very hard because I know in 3 months' time this is the answer I want, I am more likely to get it, it's all known. So I'm not challenging myself, and as results or answers are known, I'm not pushing the society, I'm not addressing the issues. So we should think in terms of putting ourselves, doing what, answering what am I should be doing in the other three quadrants. And maybe at this time, maybe I need to look at disruptive, how can I be game-changing, completely different new things, bringing AI or something, and or Edison, where I put two things together and look at that wicked problem of malnutrition and post-harvest losses. Because it seems you don't need new technology, you have plenty of technology, only thing is application of technology. So we need to do we need to identify collectively what we should be doing. Remember, when South Korea changed, 40 scientists changed South Korea. Of course, that is in number 40 was giving the leadership along different directions and different roadmaps, realizing the change in their economy. So that was 40, right? So you can think of the number here. So also we need to be interested on outcomes and not outputs, right? Outputs, we are very happy to say, sitting on shelves. It's completed, documents have been moved, everybody garlanded. These days it may reach Facebook's pages as well, that's it. Outcomes. So outputs are the tangible products of your research work. Yes, they are important, they should be there. But we should move them out. Now, as we speak here today now, we are speaking to each other where we know. So, so we know each other. So it's like Simblak on the Israel agronomist who identified how to do the drip irrigation. It was a chance find, but he perfected the point. So in that sense, he had a prototype, which is an output, right? So we need to get to the outcome. So outcome, we must move out of our comfort zone, speak to the others, and tell, look, I have found an answer to this. If they won't come to you, you need to go to them to get the change that we want. So that is why we have what we call triple helix model, right? There is universities, government, industry working together in partnership, exchanging ideas, but interested. So for the moment in today, we don't have these arrows moving well. Now it's up to us to build some of these arrows because we know the other way it's not happening. It's not that active. But we cannot blame for inactivity. It's up to us to ensure the outcome from the outputs that we have achieved. We know these outputs are of value, so we must push ourselves. So it's important. So like Simla said, when he came up with this drip irrigation system, he turned Israel from that 62% desert to one with an agricultural productivity, high productivity, patented the product and moved that into a world-class solution, drip irrigation. And it went across the world, and like in India, right, in Gujarat, so you can see that drip irrigation moving, but he was the pioneer in drip irrigation. So we need to move from this output to an outcome orientation. So I'll come to the last part of just stressing certain things we made. And here I take this opportunity that we had. Maybe we need to sometimes to think, look at what ourselves have we failed in our participation. So I remember this in COVID times. And it's very interesting. Ivor Jennings, in his book, To Road to Peradeniya, he mentioned about the pathology department here at Peradeniya. And he says the pathology museum. And he talks about the one fantastic collection they were getting, because the best of the London hospitals, the universities were not getting only about 900 specimens for that period, whereas Peradeniya was realized getting 3,000 specimens. And he was particularly saying, look, if somebody comes, how vital structure that we have put in at Peradeniya, the opportunity. He was talking about the second largest liver recorded the specimen. And he was also talking about drinking of immature arak and the hot curries together. And that's what the world's second largest liver came on. Anyway, just to think about it, but the point is, it's interesting what he has written about the amount of research and the interest that can be created in this place. So this was a case where when the German Professor Eckart came to the country, he was mentioning, look, you have 800 specimens around. And in Germany, what we do is this Germany-wide diagnostic network. He said the very first thing you should do is, in your experiments, to get a digital pathology network. And it was not doing something new. It was sharing what you have and having a couple of, essentially the scanner, and then the cloud service. Anonymizing probably is not a difficult task at all, but this never happened. So for that, this was for CKDU. So I think there are scenarios where we have to come out of our silos and do this work, like what you're having with AI and COVID, right? Bringing 2 or 3 different expertise together, and there may be the solutions coming, right? So we kind of failed here. That was his first recommendation, but a recommendation that we did not follow. And would have been different, like it's not stopping at CKDU, you can do all sorts of things afterwards, right? So that's the kind of thing. We also need to understand the why very much clear and overall goal. Again, scenarios like this on advocacy. Today we hear news items like this. I'm pretty sure with geology and the mineral processing, a lot of PGIS work has happened. We see Lanka Mineral Sand ships its largest ever consignment of mineral sand. So happy. Brilliant. Why? Because now with this money we can buy next LPG shipment or the next pharmaceutical quantum. But what are we losing? So this is advocacy, because we know as researchers, we know as science, and working together, not just one party, multiple parties coming together, we see this situation. I'm going back to a very old slide, 2008-9, right? At that time, Sri Lanka was earning, by selling sand, $8 million US, selling 80,000 metric tons of ilmenite. And for our industry, like paint industry, we were bringing 5,000 metric tons of paint pigment, titanium dioxide, it's a good white pigment. We were spending 12.5 million. So we were earning 8 million by selling sand. To get just 5,000 for the paint, we were spending 12.5 million. And because we have a good quality deposit, that 80,000 can give 40,000 metric tons. So it's like 2 tons can give 1 ton of pigment. So the potential was 100 million. This is advocacy with your knowledge. Somebody can ask the question, why aren't we then doing this? Then the point you can say, look, we don't have capex. Is that an excuse? Issue is you need to be persistent. Is this sensible? If this is not sensible, the decision has to be, how do we turn tables and do things differently? Because this is how the economic game changing can happen. It's not saying, look, we can't do that. This is Sri Lanka and we can't do this, and let's accept it. If you can accept it like that, okay. The net results we know. So as over the years we have seen, income is gone 20 million. Expenditure has also been 20 million for that 5,000 tons. Paint industry has not really changed significantly. But potential income has now ballooned to 160 million. So we see the potential And then you need to have concerted action coming together. How do you get this transformation, which is Solov's hypothesis, technology. It's very simple. Technology, but putting human capital. So the researchers and the teams come together to get these end results. Because once you get it, 1 or 2 minerals, mind you, this is only TiO2 pigment, but that mineral sand has zirconium, all sorts of stuff. It's not just minerals, titanium dioxide, titanium. So it's there. So let me conclude the question. We have to ask, looking at this, what is my purpose? What am I doing? Am I communicating what I have done outside my peer group? So yesterday it was very good, listing on the second point. So asking the question, are you working on something or are you researching on something as a team that can potentially change Sri Lanka? So I put 2 Peradeniya research, because the second one yesterday I heard, and it was really good hearing that presentation on that cinnamon. And the paper it will be landmark paper appearing today online, right? So energy storage, flow battery work at Peradeniya, right? And then the cinnamon. I mean, there are definitely there has to be more. But then the point is to see across faculties these type of research taking place on the listing and the potential transformation possible by the research, not stopping at the thesis level or the output level. And then working on advocacy to get the message across. Collectively, we should be able to swing the idea, because others will not understand what we are saying. It's up to us to that change to happen, because otherwise the transformation that we desire will not happen, right? So last, I will just paraphrase David Attenborough. So David Attenborough said at one point, how could I look at my grandchild in the eye and say, I knew what was happening to the world and did nothing? This is with respect to the environmental disaster, the climate change, etc., biodiversity loss, and etc. He's now 94 and plus, and he was there in the COP27, I think. But I just paraphrased it just to put Sri Lanka. As researchers, our knowledge indicates what is possible. Our activities have given results what should be done. But maybe we have not fully taken that research into the next level of the outcome. And we have to now think in a little higher purpose. If you think like, okay, I'm not going to take the flight, but I'm going to take the fight on. So if that fight on is the mode, and that is what we need, then it's again up to us, because others will not reach us, but we need to be very much proactive and in reaching out. We have solutions, and we can do that transformations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those amazing insights, sir. And now I would like to invite Professor M.D. Lamavansa, the Vice Chancellor of University of Peradeniya, to address the gathering.
Very good morning to all of you. Professor Janaka Ekanayaka, thank you very much for rearranging the schedule. I had another meeting downstairs with Colombo. It was really wonderful talk, and Professor Arun, I missed your talk, but I'll listen to it later on. Chief guest, Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, then our guest of honor, Professor Arun Chocklingam, and Professor Ajit Alvis, and who is our keynote speaker, deans, directors, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, 2 co-chairs, Professor Janaka Ekanayaka and Dr. Hatra Singha, academic staff, students, ladies and gentlemen, and our media friends. Thanks, Professor Janaka and the team for organizing this event, and it is a new format, and I hope that this format will work for the university. I'm sure you must have mentioned about it in your welcome address in the morning. And I wish you the very best for the new format for the coming years. Professor Ajit, in his speech, laid the background for what our university should be. and whether to fly or whether to fight the battle. Those who stay here are there to fight the battle. And also, you have given this flow, optimistic ambience to work forward, and also to identify what our strengths are. And in that background, it is very easy for me to put in perspective a couple of points that I want to place before you, ladies and gentlemen. And during the troubled period over the last 2-3 years, we had all these dilemmas as to whether to fight or fly out. But you stayed back in this country, and some of you will continue to do so. And we worked hard as a team to maintain research culture. A lot of measures were taken to improve our input and also to improve our processes, and output has not gone down. And that is something worth noting at this stage. If you look at the number of research articles in index journals, about 75% of our articles are published in international journals, only 25% in local journals. We publish about 615 articles per annum by our academic staff and the students. That amounts to about, per head staff, 0.71 articles per annum. And is this enough? Should we set a target beyond this? And there should be an institutional ambition and also the individual ambition for us to move forward. And we sometimes are very happy with presenting a paper, abstract, or a poster. There are things that we can do to convert ourselves to more meaningful research publications, which doesn't happen necessarily. And focus on the postgraduate sometimes is to get a degree, master's, MPhil, PhD. But in some other places in the country, and considering the three aspects that Professor Ajit mentioned, they focus not for a degree, but for the final outcome. Some universities in the countries that a couple of us recently went, the student has an ambition to change something, and that is what it all amounts to. I think we have the manpower and enough brains to change our culture to target our outcome beyond our short distance that we are very comfortable. Of course, for an institution, some of the research is required to change the education that we impart to our students. And we, across all the faculties, I think we can do more without much resources to expand research into the education, which we are poor at the moment, I would say. How do we improve our quality publications? It is, as Ajit mentioned again, we list problems and we live with them, and we leave those problems for the next generation to do the same. But I know that, and we need money to publish in international high impact factor journals. At the university, at the moment, we give $1,000 per article, and if there are more than one internal academics contributed to that article, or else 500. That is not enough. How do we find more funds to publish? Why not we work hard, a little bit extra, to attract more foreign grants, and you can embed certain quantum for publications. Why not we actively look to get more international collaborators from established universities? Then the publishing and the fees for publishing is not a big problem. To increase the publications, now if you look at, you mentioned about South Korea, and the person with the highest H index, if it means anything. And the highest number of citations right now is from South Korea. And how do we improve our quality research and also the number of research articles to get there? Right now, the highest citation that we have in our university is very good, 160,000 for that particular lecturer. And to get there, to get more people into that tier, what are the things we can do? One way of doing this one is to have more systematic reviews, and that will certainly give different dimension to what we do locally and also international recognition. We have now established about 25 research groups in this university during last 2 years. Is it just that we do research with some money that we have allocated and stop at that? Or else we should look for changing in behavior and very good outcome, a product of that research, and research teams themselves to transform into established research centers, that two that you are working on, Professor Janaka, AI and sociology, but there are more that we can do. And I think Professor Ajit Alvis again has given some food for thought on this. So they can become trademark research groups in this university that can work with international research groups. As one of the Canadians recently, Professor Arun told me that you have enough here, but you don't showcase them. You want us to come and tell how good you are. That is the question that he asked me at a meeting last week. We have plenty of facilities rather than crying for them. And you look at, and recently with the Chinese grant, that we have more than 1 billion worth equipment there, and in a 2 billion worth building. And for analytical purposes, for imaging purposes, we have got a lot of facilities. How do we improve the use of these facilities rather than crying for more facilities? We have postgraduates at different levels, and the number of postgraduate students come to about 8,000 now at present. But how do we increase this number and to have good caliber students pursuing PhDs? Right now we have just only 200 plus PhD students, and don't we have the capacity and the ability to improve that number in an incremental manner? Unlike in other universities, elsewhere, some of the work that the postdoctoral researchers are doing have to be done by yourself, academic staff. And using university funds, recently, during last 2 years, we gave you the opportunity to hire research assistants. Isn't it possible for us to now attract postdoctoral researchers who can be paid a basic salary from us, but as in other countries, write research grants and then attract more funds and supplement their salaries? And that baseline can be established. I'm sure my deans will agree with me, and we can allocate some funds for the faculties if that is what you want to do. Looking at the resources that our university has, and also resources means the most importantly the human resource, not the other buildings and the equipment. Because if you have got good brains, you can have everything else. And looking at all that, should we have more postgraduate students, not only at the PhD levels and the other levels? How do we make ourselves more of a postgraduate research university? Have 50% plus one at least students numbers of the total number of students pursuing postgraduate degrees. We can do that, and I'm not too optimistic, but I know that we can do it. We talk about the very high-end researchers in the world, and we are happy that after long years of work, we have produced 9 researchers who belongs to the top 2% of world researchers. Is that enough? Do we talk about that achievement, or we develop systems and processes to get that number increased and also to move up beyond that? University at the central level, we are discussing these things every time we meet with the deans and the other researchers. And to take a stock of these discussions today and tomorrow, I'll be meeting all the deans and the research representatives of the faculties on Friday and develop an improved roadmap for us to decide why we are doing things, how to do things, and what and so on. And with these few words, I apologize for not being here for the whole session. I wish you a very good research congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I kindly invite the Vice-Chancellor, Professor M.D. Lamawansa, accompanied by Dr. Dilan Satharasinghe, onto the stage to present the souvenirs, to the guest of honor, Professor Arun Shokalingam, and to the keynote speaker, Professor Ajit D. Alves. Thank you, sir. Now, I kindly invite the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Terence Madhujit, accompanied by Professor Primali Jayasuriya, to officially launch the proceedings of the conference and to mark the beginning of an engaging and enriching event. Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly invite you to direct your attention to the screen as we present the vote of thanks, an expression of our deep appreciation for the support and participation that has made this event possible. Your contributions have been instrumental in shaping the success of this occasion, and we encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate our collective efforts. With the conclusion of our inaugural session and expression of our heartfelt gratitude, we embark on a journey of knowledge and collaboration. We thank you for gracing this occasion with your presence, and we look forward to the enlightening sessions ahead. There's a very small announcement to be made. Please make sure that the deans, invited guests, directors of the Postgraduate Institute of Science, other directors, and the organizing committee to go to the cafeteria of the Postgraduate Institute of Science for refreshments. And for the other participants, tea will be served outside the auditorium. With that being said, I encourage all attendees to participate in their respective technical session. We look forward to engaging discussions and deep dives into specialized topics. Thank you. Have a great day.